What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. Now in this one, I'm going to show you guys how to build an awesome 1440p gaming PC build for between $1,500 and $1,600. This is a system that's going to look absolutely fantastic with an all-white color scheme throughout, provide great performance in not only 1440p, but also high frame rate 1080p gaming too, and uses a brand new case that I've heard a whole lot about. Let's do this. The GeekaByte G6X is here, packing plenty of power with the Intel Core HX processor lineup and NVIDIA GeForce RTX 40 series laptop GPUs for powerful gaming, Dolby Atmos integration, power delivery 3.0 for fast Type-C charging, and a 90% screen-to-bezel ratio provide an immersive experience with all the home comforts. The 165Hz refresh rate and 16:10 aspect ratio make it great for gaming on the go or getting work done. Learn more at the first links in the description below. Typically in my PC builds, I'd start with the CPU and GPU combo, but today I'm actually very intrigued about this case. Now, if you've watched the channel for a long time, you know that the case is one of my favorite parts in any build, and particularly I like finding really good value options. This is the Antec C5 Constellation. This Antec C5 comes in for around the £100, $110 price points, but actually includes 7 ARGB fans within the price. Now, when you compare that to other cases, like Corsair's 3500 as just one example, and even the Montage King 95, which I love, for the base models of those, you get no fans included as standard, which can add a lot of expense. So far, we're off to a very good start. The packaging feels absolutely top-notch, got these little cardboard reinforcements, and the foam is actually soft cell, so this is going to do a great job of absorbing any impacts in shipping. Now, look at that! So it's fish tank design like we've all come to know and love on the market at the moment. Power supply goes in the rear, motherboard GPU at the front. Side panel wise, looks like just a pair of thumb screws. They're not captive, in case you were wondering. And inside you can see the 7 fans, so 3 in the bottom in intake, 3 on the side in intake, and 1 in exhaust, so definitely positive pressure in the case. The only thing I'm not entirely sure about is this bit of cable mess. I guess when the motherboard's installed and with a bit of effort, we can probably remedy that. Glass panel at the front, dust filter at the top in case you wanted even more exhaust. And then around the back, even more mesh ventilation, both not captive, both for the power supply, which is on this side, and of course the intake fans, which are on the other side. Moving around to the back, and there are even more things. The white-sleeved JFP1 front panel connections. It's great to see here that everything is all completely color matched. And again, this is an area where more expensive cases just fail. Looks like we've got some drive mounting down here at the bottom. Again, you have to unscrew this by the looks of things in order to get the case accessory box out. So Antec, in future, if we could have that maybe be toolless, that would be great. Remember though, this is not a particularly expensive case, so that's probably part of the reason why it is the way, well, that it is. Inside the accessory box is obviously going to be all the screws you're going to need for the build, and I'm hoping some cable ties as well. Yes, not very many, but they are in there. First impressions though are pretty good. Just going to tidy up some of the wires with some cable ties to make things a bit cleaner before we get started. You can see that's looking a lot better already. A couple of these cables are going to be run later on, such as the SATA power and also the RGB control for the motherboard. The rest I'm hoping is going to get a little bit more tidy and hidden once the motherboard is installed just up here. Talking of which, let me walk you guys through what I'm actually going to fill this build up with. And let's start, shall we, with the motherboard, because it sticks perfectly with the theme in the build today. Now this is the GeekaByte Aorus B650 Elite AX Ice, and it's one of my favorite boards that I've seen in, well, quite a while. What's really nice about this is it does all the important stuff. Wow, the IO's good, the connectivity's good, but the PCB is white. A lot of the accents on the board are white too, and although the RAM DIMMs, I think they have to be black due to some heat reasons, is what I've been told by not only GeekaByte but other board partners too. I like that they've got white RAM DIMM clips on the end just to help tie the whole thing in that bit better. Of course, you get PCIe Gen 5 on the top M.2 SSD with further M.2 expansion too, and crucially, you get the AM5 socket up top as well, which provides support for a wide range of CPUs. Now, talking of CPUs, I was a little split for this build with what to use, and I've gone for the Ryzen 7 9700X, and let me explain why, because I know what you're thinking. The 7800X 3D would be good in this build, but it's a bit overkill, and if you've seen the price of that chip right now, I just don't think it's really the best option for this system. The other choice would be a lower end Ryzen 5 like the 7600X, but that's potentially going to introduce a little bit more of a CPU bottleneck than I would like, and the extra cores of an 8-core chip would be preferable. That then left me with the 77 or 7900X. This is the newer version, so provides a small increase in performance and a bigger increase in power efficiency. Check the two prices on both chips I'll link them both down below for Amazon and Newegg, and go for whichever represents the best value. Alongside this CPU, I'll also be popping into place 32GB of RAM. This is a CL30 6000 MHz kit from G.Skill. It's their Ripjaws M, and I think it looks really quite lovely. It's basically like their G.Skill Trident Z5 that we all know and love, but it's a bit cheaper and a little bit more basic by design. I'm also going to pop in an NVMe drive as well at this stage. This is the Team Group MP44L. Used it in quite a few builds, and you can check out our review of this drive on GeekaWhat.com in the card section now. Now then, shall we install the CPU? Obviously, no stock cooler included with this, so I'll talk you through what I've picked instead in a moment. And of course, we want an aftermarket cooler because it's going to be so much quieter. Really, really great chip this, 8 cores, 16 threads, and as you can see, it's brand spanking new. In order to install it, just going to pull the arm on the socket up, release the socket cover, drop the CPU into place, and return the socket cover back down. RAM is next. I'll be using slots 2 and slots 4 to install the memory in this build, before wrapping up with the NVMe drive in the top M.2 slot. Remember to take the thermal pad cover off on the heatsink to ensure the drive stays nice and cool. Talking of which, for this build, I've gone for this, the Cooler Master Hyper 622 Halo White. I've got a bit of a confession to make, and that is that I'd originally planned to use this for the build, the Hyper 212 Halo White, and I'll be honest, this is going to be adequate for like the vast majority of you guys watching. However, if you want to do a little bit of CPU overclocking, you want to fill the build out a bit more, you want something that gives a bit more wow factor and a bit more airflow, this is what I would go for. And with these two fans, these 7 fans, it gives us 9 120mm fans in this build. 920mm fans. I've got no idea how to install it, as I don't think I've actually used this before, so let's open it up and take a look. Now, bag of included mounting hardware and accessories is always a good start. Oh, nice. Look at how beautiful those white heat pipes are as well. That is quite the spectacle. It also does come with a manual, which I would highly recommend you consult in order to install the actual cooler onto the build. Right, okay. So, if you take a look at the motherboard, you'll see those white plastic brackets. They've got to go. Get rid of those. And then in their place, I'm going to add some posts and then 2 silver brackets and 2 silver thumb screws on each. They are then going to provide the actual threads for the cooler itself to install onto. Make sure to torque these tight, by the way, with a screwdriver, just to ensure that these brackets aren't going to go anywhere. This is going to be holding the entire weight of the cooler itself. Then I'm going to go ahead and just remove, I think, the center fan. So just pull these brackets out. That should then release the fan. Yes, it has. Lovely stuff. And you'll be able to see just here 2 silver screws. These are what are actually going to fasten onto the cooler. I have maybe screwed up slightly with the RAM clearance, potentially. Let's see. It's slightly embarrassing if so. Oh, what a beauty. It fits like a glove. In order to do this, I need some thermal paste, which should also come in a tube in the box. So what you're going to do is open up the tube and then drop a large grain of rice-sized sort of thermal paste on the chip itself, just enough to create a nice thermal bond between the CPU and the cooler, and then catch any excess back in the lid. And now the lid and the tube will stick together to be fused forevermore. Then make sure you peel. If you forget to do this, you're in for a bad time, before dropping the CPU cooler into place. Get rid of those cables, get it all nice and tidy, lined up. Yep. Oh, what a beauty. Just so you guys can see, it's going to be this silver screw here we need to fasten down, and of course the one on the other side. Then just a case of sliding the fan back on, getting the brackets to clip over either side, and then plugging up the wiring harness for the RGB, and you can see that that terminates into 2 4-pin PWM fan headers and a 3-pin 5-volt ARGB, which will wire up to the motherboard or the built-in case controller. Now that is what you call planned to perfection. Look how good the clearance is. Oh gosh, that's like it's meant to be. With that all done, it's time to move the motherboard and CPU cooler into the case. Going to check in a case that all the standoffs are in the right places. They look to be, and of course, built-in rear I/O shield on all the boards nowadays makes the next job a bit easier. Grab the motherboard assembly by the heat sinks, slide it into place. Wow, that is a heavy, heavy motherboard. Unfortunately, none of the standoffs in this case are actually raised, which is a bit of a shame. So I'm going to lay the whole thing flat on the table just to make this next bit that bit easier. Yeah, that is definitely a bit easier. And then I'm going to secure the motherboard down. So we've got 9 screws in total, 3 along the top, 3 along the middle, and then 3, of course, down the bottom. The real test, though, is going to be whether the glass side panel fits on top with the cooler. Keep your fingers crossed. Right, here we go. So it's just a cursory fit. It just needs to slide on, and that fits perfectly. So that's really good. I'm really, really pleased about that. Really tall cooler, but I think the colors and the design actually matches the whole system really, really well. I feel then at this stage like cables and wiring might make the most sense, as much as I'd really like to install the GPU now. For this, I'm going to be using the Thermaltake Smart BM3 750 watt, pretty basic ATX3 PCI Gen 5 power supply, not much more to say. And I've also gone ahead and picked up these PSU cable extensions from Amazon. Now, the only thing I don't like about these is that they actually have black cable ends. The easy DIY fab ones are white. This was the only kit at the time I could find with a Gen 5 extender, and it's a proper one. It's not like, you know, 4 8-pins to one Gen 5. It's actually a proper digital connector with the 4 data pins and 12 power pins that I want for the build. So I'm going to slide the PSU in the rear and then run the extensions to the motherboard CPU power in the top left, motherboard main power on the right hand side. GPU power, of course, I'll leave until later before finishing off with all the front panel connectors. We're talking USB 3 Type A, USB 3 Type C, HD audio, and of course the JFP1 front panel. RGB for the case, I'll decide later whether I want to run that to the motherboard for software control or use the button on the top of the chassis. And once all the cables are done, I can wrap things up with the GPU. Now, I was a little bit worried about this card on the basis of its size. It's quite small, really. Now, that's impressive from Zotac, and to be honest with you, given the heat output of the 4070 Super, you aren't going to have any problems with a cooler of this, well, dimension. However, I want the case to not kind of look like it dwarfs the GPU too much, so I'm hoping that this looks sort of roughly proportional. Now, I can hover the card in immediately just to see. Yes, it's small, but I actually think that looks okay. Now, this one is really nice. It's actually a white card, a 2-fan white card, so perfect for a build like this. And as you can see, the back plate looks really very nice with a silver outline, white center, and a bit of color with the Zotac gaming logo. 4070 Super's a great card when it comes to 1440p gaming. Ray tracing, DLSS are both much better than their AMD counterparts. Very power efficient GPU, and it's a card which is cheaper now than it has ever been. AMD will give you more rasterization performance, but in this build, as explained earlier, I've gone Nvidia based on the fact that it's what most of you guys prefer in your builds. Also, this card matches the whole aesthetic really very nicely. Now, in order to install the GPU, I'm going to remove a couple of the PCI lanes. You can see here the PCI lane screws are actually on the outside of the case. That tends to be a sign of slightly cheaper chassis, but you know what? I've enjoyed building in the C5, and to be honest with you, as much as it doesn't look like the world's cheapest case from the outset, given the staggering 7 included ARGB fans, I mean, that has to be a record for a case at this price point. I really can't complain. Then a simple case of pushing back the clip on the PCI slot and sliding the graphics card into place. Yes. Get it lined up. Lovely stuff. Couple of screws, the ones I just removed from the PCI lane brackets to secure this into place. Then just the final PCI cover to wrap pretty much the whole build up. Oh, and of course the power cable. Don't forget that too. And I think that looks pretty good. I will show you guys what this system looks like with some slightly larger graphics cards so you can see actually whether the case may suit a bigger GPU, but I genuinely think it looks absolutely fine in this config. All that then remains is to plug the power cable into the back of this thing, get the switch to on, see if my, whoa! Oh, that was very, very short false start. I've knocked the power switch on the back there. Whoa! Look at that! Now, there's definitely some cable management to be done. Not 100% sure on these cables at the top here, but I mean, it's really, really very close. Fans are very loud at the moment, so I'm also going to configure those before testing out the performance. But before then, I think you know what it might be time for. An epic montage! Yes! Switch. Hit the ejector seat. Looking amazing, but what about performance? Because that's the bit that, let's face it, really matters. Well, let's start off, shall we, with a pretty difficult test for this system, with Cyberpunk 2077. I tested here at 1440p, high settings, DLSS on quality, frame gen on, and RT or ray tracing on medium, and I was really pleased. 165 FPS was a fantastic result, and the game looked great with that ray tracing tech turned on, and we didn't see a massive frame rate hit in the process. Star Wars Outlaws was was also really positive. 1440p high settings, DLSS quality, and frame gen again enabled, and we saw pretty much identical results with 164 frames per second on average. Turn off all the ray tracing in Alan Wake 2 at 1440p high, and our results were a little bit more realistic with 76 FPS on average. The game looking great, I thought, in the process. Not easy games to run Cyberpunk, Star Wars, and Alan Wake 2, and neither is the next game on the list, Black Myth Wukong. Here at 1440p high, the build again did well. Over 70 FPS again, slightly lower than Alan Wake 2 with just 72 frames per second, but I really can't complain at that. Hogwarts Legacy was the lowest frame rate of any game that we tested. Here we did test at 4K high, which perhaps explains why that might be the case, but we still achieved more than the magical 60 FPS number, which I was pretty happy with. For some much easier tests, Apex Legends and Fortnite round off the benchmarking runs today. Apex at 1440p high soared through the 200 frame per second mark with 238 FPS on average, super buttery smooth and very competitive, while Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings, that's everything set to low at 1080p except the render distance, which was tuned up to far, delivered more than 300 FPS from this 4070 Super and Ryzen 7 9700X combo. What do you think of this build? I personally really enjoyed building in Antec's new C5 case, and although it was a little rough around the edges in places, for the price I don't think you can go too far wrong. If you want to find any more information about any of the parts mentioned today, you can find that at the affiliate links in the description below for Amazon and Newegg. Get subscribed if you want to see more from me. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.